On today's show, an old friend stops by for a two-part episode. My friend and friend of the podcast, Tyler Jones, will be joining me talking about the entire offseason for the Hawks, how the vibes are in Atlanta right now, the Kevin Huerter trade, the Dejounte Murray trade, all of that, and a full-on catch-up after the frenzy coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1284 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Wednesday evening into Thursday. And thank you for joining us, as always, on the podcast and making us your first listen each and every day. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, Podbean, wherever you like to listen to podcasts. We should be there on the video side, on the audio side, etc. And today's show is a two-part deep dive with my friend and friend of the podcast, Tyler Jones, a fan favorite to be sure. Everyone seems to love when Tyler comes on the podcast. It's been a little while, so we have plenty to discuss, and it's a pretty lengthy two-part episode to kind of carry over through the rest of the week and into the weekend. One thing that I want to do before we bring in Tyler, though, is talk about Kyle Korver, the big news of the week for the Atlanta Hawks. So Shams Charania reported earlier this week that the Hawks were close to a deal with Korver to join the front office in some capacity. And then Laura Williams of the AJC confirmed that on Tuesday, I believe it was. And then the Hawks on Wednesday announced the hire of Kyle Korver as the Director of Player Affairs and Development for the franchise. Landry Fields, the Hawks GM and number 2 in command on the basketball side, gave a quote, and it was as follows, quote, "We are excited to bring Kyle back to the Hawks. He's a tremendous person and someone whose presence will benefit all of our players, both on and off the court. Drawing from him his unique experiences over a 17-year playing career as a late second-round pick who later became an all-star in Atlanta and one of the league's all-time best shooters." End quote. Korver, of course, is familiar to those of us who have been covering or watching the Hawks for a long time, was with the Brooklyn Nets last season in a player development role, sort of a non-bench, but certainly around the team kind of coaching staff kind of role. He's now 41 years old, retired after the 2019-20 season, played almost 350 games with the Hawks over 5 years. Second most games he ever played on any team, along with the Philadelphia 76ers. Spent his best years with the Hawks. Of course, made an All-Star appearance in 2015. He was on the best regular season Hawks team in history, the 60-win team, I guess 7 or 8 years ago at this point in time, had a 64% true shooting mark with the Hawks. That's how good of a shooter Kyle Korver was, including 45.2% from three. I covered Kyle up close and personal. He's one of the best shooters in the history of the league. And here's one crazy stat for you on this Wednesday into Thursday. Kyle Korver right now, today, is number 5 all-time in NBA history in three-pointers. Yes, number 5 all-time made threes, Kyle Korver. So obviously an elite shooter in his day, but even more than an elite shooter, honestly, was a very, very effective player, unlocked the Hawks offense during that famous run, et cetera. I can go crazy about covering Kyle and all that stuff. But for now, obviously a very, very good player for a long time and an interesting addition to the front office. Not a role that is too common in the current NBA. And a few of the national writers like John Hollinger and Seth Partnow kind of referred to it as sort of a development czar kind of role, or sort of a conduit between the front office and the coaching staff that a couple teams are kind of doing at this point in time. As part of the release, the Hawks said the following about Korver's role. They said he'll be, quote, assisting in creating and overseeing a development plan for each Hawks player in partnership with the coaches, athletic performance team, and front office. So it's kind of a do-it-all kind of role between the front office and the coaching staff and the athletic trainers, et cetera. Notably, it says he'll assist with those creations and overseeing. So not exactly responsible for it on his own, but has a real title. That Director of Player Affairs and Development title is a pretty prominent role. So interesting kind of addition to the franchise that does not really exist before. He's not replacing anyone. This is a new creation for the Hawks. Also, the Hawks have kind of lost a lot of their Hawks University structure from the Budenholzer era. This is sort of an investment in development on that front. Famously, Nate said last year that the Hawks were not really in development mode anymore. I think they got kind of blown out of proportion a little bit because obviously they're still trying to develop the young guys. But one thing the Hawks were known for during the Budenholzer era was kind of taking these guys that weren't rookies, weren't second-year players, and really developing them either with their shooting or skill development. Like Dwayne Dedmon was a famous example of this. A bunch of the wings that they brought in during that time. Damari Carroll was a huge example. Kent Bazemore, another of those guys. Those guys got paid big money off the Hawks, who kind of came in as like almost minimum guys and then kind of sort of transformed from there. So sort of maybe a return to that. But still, it's not a coaching staff that has been terribly focused on the future in the recent past. So having Korver around as someone who's close to the roster, close to the coaching staff and the front office, explicitly doing that makes some sense to me. I also don't want to go crazy and overstating the impact of this move. I saw some Hawks fans like just deciding that Korver is going to change everything on his own. And I will say this, if it was not a recognizable former Hawks player in this role, I think fans would not necessarily be caring that much about this. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to be able to like overnight transform AJ Griffin or make Trae Young, Steph Curry off the ball, anything like that stuff. But I do think that it's a really good idea and a really good hire. That's kind of my overall takeaway. You never want to be, too judgmental of this kind of stuff because, frankly, as close as I am to the proceedings, even on the outside, I'm still on the outside. Fans even further so, obviously. So I try not to lend my voice too much in a critical mass when I don't necessarily understand all this stuff. And I will always say there's stuff that coaching staffs deal with, that front office deal with that I'll never know. But I do think that on the whole, bringing Kyle Korver to a prominent role is a good idea. In my mind, I think he's definitely a guy that people seem to love around the league. I would say even when he was with the Hawks, he was beloved in that locker room. I covered his entire tenure with the Hawks as a player. He was always the kind of the go-to guy for really candid and frank and like real insight on the team. A lot of guys will give you good quotes. Korver will actually give you genuine insight on basketball stuff, non-basketball stuff, all that fun stuff. So his interpersonal skills, he seems to be really liked, and he's a good speaker, all that stuff, sort of communication-wise, someone that you would want to have around your team as well. So, I think this is a good hire, obviously, what we know right now. And also, as the release kind of noted from the Hawks side, Korver was not someone who was just like a natural talent that was like a top 10 pick. He was a late second-round pick that carved out a 15-ish year kind of career in the NBA, became an all-star, had to sort of scratch and claw, obviously had the elite trait with his shooting, but he became a solid defender. He became a really good ball mover as a passer, et cetera. So very sort of varied skill set, varied in terms of like what he saw around the NBA, different teams, different franchises. So I think this is a really good hire if the Hawks were going to do this. And I think that it's a good idea in general to have this kind of player development focus. Not just, and by the way, I think development always gets put in this like rookie or sophomore thing. It's a team-wide thing. You can sort of unlock certain skills from guys who are in their 20s or even heading into their upper 20s, et cetera. So I like the move. I don't want to go crazy about it. It's not going to like transform the franchise necessarily on itself right now. But Kyle Korver's back with the Hawks franchise, and that's sort of the headline event here as we head into the dark days of the offseason as we're here on July 20th as I record this. So I say all that. Most of today's podcast, in fact, the rest of today's podcast, and this, again, a two-part episode, will be myself and Tyler Jones talking about DeAndre Hunter as a pivot point this season, talking about John Collins returning to the franchise, talking about Dejounte Murray and Trae Young, both the addition of Murray on the whole and also him playing with Trae, the loss of Kevin Huerter, Justin Holiday, etc. Lots of different topics. Tyler and I could get talking for a long time, so there's no shortage of content on this episode, this two-part episode, I should say, and then I'm sure we'll have Tyler back in the near future. He's definitely a fan favorite. In fact, I said this in a minute when I actually talk to him, but generally speaking, he's the person that Hawks fans seems to request the most. For some background, Tyler is a Hawks fan. He's a very plugged in and informed Hawks fan, but he's really the only person that I have on the podcast with any regularity that's not a writer, not a media member, not a player, coach, obviously beyond that stuff. But Tyler is the sort of the voice of the Hawks fan on this podcast. If you've never heard him on the show, hopefully you will enjoy the conversation. We always have fun talking about basketball together. So with all that said, please subscribe to the podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. YouTube is also a great place to find the show on the video side. Please follow the show on Twitter and all that fun stuff. But after a quick break to hear from our sponsors, we'll be back with Tyler Jones and a fun conversation. Today's show is brought to you by BetOnline, and Summer League, of course, is now over in Las Vegas. The draft is behind us. Most of free agency is done as well, and all eyes are on the future across the NBA world with that in mind. BetOnline is the place to be to fire away on futures market and also the number one place in the sports world for all of your betting needs and information, both in the near future and always. Find all the latest odds, news, and developments across the sports world. That includes baseball odds, of course, that's happening again right now after the All-Star break. Major events that are going on, the latest scores, the latest fights, even next season's futures on the NBA, college basketball, college football, the NFL, NHL, etc. BetOnline is a continued source for all the wagering avenues that you'd like as well. That includes live betting and esports, poker, and even a ton of casino games as well. And really beyond that, they have all the sports that you want. They have hockey, they have golf, they have tennis, auto racing, rugby, the more obscure stuff like lacrosse and table tennis. They also have horse racing and cricket, entertainment bets, and any sport you could possibly think of. They have it at BetOnline. Head there right now on your computer mobile device to learn more about all the trends and the action across the sports world. BetOnline, where the game starts. I am joined now for the first time in a while. I try not to bug this person too often, but I will say this, as I always do on the show. I get more requests for this person to come on the podcast than anyone. And my guest today, and for I think what's going to be a two-part episode, is my friend Tyler Jones. Hello, sir. How are you?
How the Braves looking? We looking good, aren't we?
And we're off. Yes, the Braves finished the first half of the season. This is my serious answer to your not serious question. 33-11, last 44. Cooking right now.
Wait, 33-11. Didn't the Hawks finish 30-10,
famously? Yes.
Man, those were better times for the Hawks fans, but it should be a little bit better now. But no, I want to get my Braves out there. We had 5 All-Stars. Probably should have had 6 or 7, but
Cobb County's finest, Dansby Swanson, All-Star.
He's about to get paid the big bucks. I'm happy for him. He's not going to be taking a hometown discount. I have no sources on that. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I can almost guarantee if he's coming back to Atlanta, they're going to have to pay as much as any other team. So,
if you hear anything in the exclusive Cobb County group chat that you're able to Dansby Swanson, let me know so I can report it. That'd be good. But obviously, we could talk about Braves all day long. But it's been a while since you and I talked in this form. We always talk offline about everything. But I realized when we were prepping, at least when I was prepping earlier today, that you and I had not discussed in public any of what the Hawks did in the offseason. Now, I know that seems like a while ago now because they've been pretty quiet for like 2 weeks. But in order, they made draft picks. They did not trade John Collins, which I know pleases you as the number one John Collins fan. They also traded a lot for Dejounte Murray. They sent out Kevin Huerter. They played an entire Summer League run without their first round pick.
Peace, Kevin Huerter, man.
Yeah, we're gonna do all this. I realized that we don't talk about any of this stuff. So
he sent that to Kings. That's
are you gonna be a Kings fan now? I thought you were only gonna follow John Collins around, not necessarily Kevin Huerter.
I'm gonna follow Huerter. Like, man, how can you not follow Kevin Huerter and root for him?
I love Kevin Huerter.
Like Game 7 on the road to make it to the conference finals. Like,
he's a good dude too. Like, by all accounts, obviously we don't know these guys ever. I always say that, but in my interactions with him, I greatly enjoyed my time with Kevin Huerter. So there you go.
And then they hired Kyle Korver after.
They did.
Kevin Huerter. That's just.
I talked about Kyle Korver before I brought you in on this podcast. But do you have a take on Kyle Korver before we move on? Did that please you as a longtime Hawks fan to see Kyle back in the organization?
I mean, what is he? Player development.
Yes, it's an interesting role. It's definitely sort of a. I think it's one of those. From what I could gather today and people around the league, it's a role that's becoming more popular. It's kind of like this. It's a kind of a hybrid role between coaching staff and front office. Like he's in the front office, but it's player development in a way that is kind of a coaching style role. So it's an interesting kind of hybrid former player role, but it's a real job. Like he's got a real job. It's not one of those fake front office roles. It's a real job.
I mean, what I imagine what the role is going to be similar to what the Hawks did with Budenholzer with their player development, where they
Hawks University, baby.
Yeah, Hawks U. They try to bring some of that back. I'm not even sure that ever left really, but it's just been different because they're developing rookies and sophomores recently instead of getting vets to kind of change their games in certain ways to make the team better. So it'll be interesting. He's one of the greatest shooters of all time and like an unbelievable worker. Like I'd have to imagine he's got nothing but good things to say to these young guys to help them, get better in certain areas. Just even beyond just shooting the basketball, because like I know that's what Korver was known for, but I mean, he really changed. Like Korver, like to me as a fan of the Hawks, he changed how I perceived basketball, probably more than any other player. Because like before you're just a fan of the team, you're just watching on the ball, right? You just like if you're casual or even if you're above casual, like even if you know numbers, you're not really paying attention to what's happening off the ball. Kyle Korver, to understand how great he was, and I felt two things about him. One, he probably was the most important player on those Hawks runs, even though he wasn't the best. He probably was the most valuable, and I really wish he got to play with Budenholzer maybe even 10 years earlier in his career, because he might have. I think if he would have played under Mike Budenholzer, who valued what he did off the ball, the way he moved off the ball, the way he manipulated defenses, the way the way he just kept moving, that generated driving lanes for Jeff Teague and opened up the floor for Al Horford and Paul Millsap to do their things, and DeMarre Carroll as well. Like, that's something like Steph does it too, but Steph plays in the West Coast, and like and Steph wasn't Steph back like during this period. Like, he was good, and like it was like he and Korver were kind of on the. They kind of implemented at the same time this idea that you can be a dominant basketball player, truly dominant off the ball. Now, Kyle Korver just never had to handle Steph Curry, but just the attention Korver brought that he generated just because you couldn't give that man an open three-pointer, and like he was going to work for it. Like, it wasn't going to give it to him, and he couldn't dribble, but he was going to run off every screen multiple times in a short amount of time span just to get an open look. And he was also a lot better defensively than he ever got credit for as well.
Agreed.
So it like I say, it's good to have him. Really wish he and Huerter got to talk just to, just so to get Huerter to see the game more than just being on the ball. Because I do think, and I hopefully, in Sacramento, like I think he'll be able to actually become a better basketball player than he ever could in Atlanta, just because he'll have more responsibility. It's just natural. He's just going to have more responsibility. They'll be more invested in his success. He has less competition for minutes, and I think he's really going to shine. But I really wish he kind of, he got the, just because Huerter, like, he kind of pushes back on the shooter label, and I get it, but Huerter's not the caliber of shooter that Kyle Korver or even like JJ Redick was, coming off the ball, like coming off a screen and hard, like just like the type of athleticism and skill it takes to master that skill. Huerter wasn't even close to getting there, and I kind of really wished that I felt like that would be his next evolution as a player, just so that if he could add the off ball shooting to his dribble package that he already has in his passing, like he could have been and I still think he can be a real player in this league. But nothing but the best for Huerter, and like at the end of the day, like getting Korver, it can be nothing but a good thing. Like he's a great guy to be, like, I'm pretty sure he's a great guy to talk and be around with.
Yeah, I obviously we don't spend too much time on Korver. It's just one of those things that obviously that was noteworthy news this week, and I want to overstate it, but certainly a valuable addition to what's going on. I do want to start kind of broad, and we'll kind of course, do what we do and take some detours and things. But I'm going to ask this question very open-ended. How are you feeling about the Hawks right now, as resident ombudsman / Hawks fan on this podcast? What's the temperature like over there in terms of the Hawks here? We're recording this on July 20th. How are we feeling?
Brad, I want to be rah-rah guy and be like, oh yeah, we're back. We're back. Eastern Conference Finals, is like that or bust, right? Or all that good stuff. But I don't know. I'm not sure they got that much better than what they were going to be if they kept the team together. I don't know if you disagree with me or not on this point. It just feels like, and this is not to say they didn't, like, this isn't to say they didn't improve the roster, because they did, and they got better in certain areas, but they also lost a lot of shooting.
Yep.
And this supposed starting lineup, I think it can work. I think it'll work. Trae Young, Dejounte Murray. Like, I think that could be a very dynamic 1-2 punch to start games, but it's really going to require both of them to be a lot better off the ball, something they have not shown it in either of their careers yet. And so it's just tough to be like, and also you lost Huerter, and I know people be like, man, Huerter wasn't that good. I push back on all that. Huerter did so much that, like, his secondary passing really opened up the floor. It's really the juice for the Hawks offense in a ways that DeAndre Hunter just hasn't done from the wing position. And now we're in a position, like, to me, you got better. You got better in certain areas. Like, you got a guy who can take the ball out of Trae Young's hand legitimately and have Trae Young off the ball. and you improved your defense, I think they should be aiming for a top 10 defense. If they're not top 10, or if they're not in the range of a top 10 defense, I'll put it that, because they don't have to exactly be top 10 to be top 10. I'm an accountant, and I statistics every day, so I understand like median outcomes, but they need to be in the median of a top 10 defense, like they were 2 years ago when they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I think they have the talent now, including the guys coming off the bench and the guys they lost, addition by subtraction on the defensive end. They should be better defensively, but it's going to be tough. The NBA is tough, man. Like the one thing I'll say that something I didn't account for last year until like middle of the season, teams aren't tanking anymore. Like a lot of teams are okay hunting for that 10th seed. There are no easy outs. And the Eastern Conference was tough last year. 10th seed won what? 43 games?
43 games last year, yep.
43 games. Me and you, Brad, we've grown up with the Eastern Conference.
Well, that was the 6th seed. Yeah. that was a 6th seed sometimes.
A 10th seed. The Knicks. Everybody climbed the Knicks, how bad they were, all this. Didn't they win like 39 games or something?
Yeah, the Knicks were respected. I mean, here's the point of comparison. So the year before, the Hawks and Knicks famously tied for the 4 seed. The Hawks were the 5 seed technically in that playoff round. Those teams had about a 57% win percentage that year, and they were tied for the 4 seed in the East 2 years ago. Last year, the 6 seed was 56%. So like that would have been the 6 seed, but basically that would have only been 2 games ahead of the 9 seed.
Yeah.
Last year. And that was the 4 seed the previous year. So like you could argue, I think that's not even like a hot take that the East was better last year, because it definitely was. But even the teams that you didn't think were, honestly, I didn't think they were that great. Like teams like Cleveland, teams like Charlotte, who I thought were like not great. Those were 500 plus teams last year. And that doesn't even include the Knicks, who you mentioned. And the Wizards didn't have Beal for half the season, and they won 35 games. Like that wasn't a terrible basketball team. They were okay. There were three bad teams in the East last year out of 15. 3. And there were really only 5 teams in the whole league that were bad last year. Like Portland became bad at the end because they wanted to be, but there were really 5 teams last year that were bad. It was the Pacers, and even then they were trying early in the season.
Pacers
but you could say,
early, yep.
Yeah, Pacers, Pistons, Magic, Thunder, and Rockets were the only teams that were like genuinely bad last season for the most part. And even then, I would personally probably cross the Pacers off for the first like 3 months. when they still had Sabonis, and they were actually kind of trying. You could say there were only 4 bad teams in the league. And the Hawks aren't that far away from being one of those teams. 3 or 4 years ago, they were one of those bad teams, but there aren't that many this year too. Like that's one of the things, like big picture league wise, I think every team in the league, sans maybe Houston, is trying now. Maybe the Thunder are still not trying, but they're getting close to turning the corner to start trying again. Indiana's going to try this year, it seems like.
I think Chet Holmgren is going to win them a lot of games. I know there's a Hawks podcast and we're supposed to be exclusively talking about the Hawks, but
no, we're good. You know me.
The Chet Holmgren discussion and the takes were so funny to me, because it's like, at the end of the day, the dude's a good passer. He has a good handle, and he's a good shooter. And he might already be one of the better rim protectors in the NBA today. And like, I know,
but he's skinny, Tyler. He's skinny.
I mean, yeah, it's like, oh, Kenny Lofton beasted him. But yeah, but did you see their guards get to the paint? What were they doing? How many? I watched. Is his name Xavier Simpson?
Yes, it is, sir.
For the Magic, correct? Yeah. I watched Simpson multiple times. You know, he wants to get to that sky hook. Multiple times when they played each other. Jump, do a full 180 spin to pass the ball out because Chet was right there and he had no chance. It's rim protection has somehow gotten aggressively underrated amongst like just NBA intellectual.
I mean,
Everybody
Well,
just loves switching defenses.
There's a great example on the Hawks roster, by the way. A guy we talked about a lot, but for some reason there are still people that think Clint Capella is not good at basketball, and it's like, you ever watch Clint Capella play defense?
But it's like rim protection. You want to win games especially in the regular season. You get a rim protector. You've instantly turned you've instantly taken multiple options that other teams want to run, like flat out. And so it's like, I really think the Thunder might sneak up on some teams, but that's beside the point. The larger point is this: they're not going to be any easy outs, especially like there's just not going to be any easy games, easy wins that you can bank, like how the Hawks did when they went on their run. Like that, a lot of their run was fueled by playing lesser teams while also getting healthy at the same time. For the Hawks to be where they want to be, they're going to have to be consistently good basketball team, which they can do. And they did it. They did it last year. They weirdly just struggled against teams under 500. It wasn't weirdly. We can talk about why that happened, but I don't really want to get into it anymore.
No, but they were like, to your point, they were they were relatively okay against bad teams last year. Is that they struggled against the good teams, and that is what it is. Yeah. No, I think that's all fair, and I think that, in fact, I've already heard that. I'm not going to talk about over-unders just yet because BetOnline is not coming out with theirs and all that stuff, but I can already hear, I've already seen and heard from Hawks fans that are frustrated with the Hawks being projected as like somewhere in the 5 to 7 range in the East, and I'll just say this: that's where they're going to be projected. You can disagree with it. I understand that, but there is pretty much no scenario where you'll hear mainstream outlets project them to be in the top 4 of the East this year, as currently constructed. Now, could they do that? Certainly they could. And we'll get into that, as I'm sure, over the next 6 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it's going to be. But you're not going to see people pick them ahead of the likes of Boston, Milwaukee, Philly, Miami. They're just not going to be picked in that group. It's going to be, you'll see the Hawks grouped with teams like Toronto. Maybe Brooklyn's obviously a giant question at this point. I have no idea what's happening in Brooklyn. If KD is still there, then that's KD still there. But like, you'll see them with Toronto and Cleveland and Chicago. Like that's going to be the group you're going to see for the Hawks, most likely. Now, do they have upside beyond that? For sure they do. But I can already kind of see that building. Like, and I wonder if you feel the same way. Like, Hawks fans are like, wait, we had this kind of big splashy move with Murray. Why are we not projected alongside Miami, Milwaukee, Boston now? And it's like, well, to your point earlier, they're better. Well, and I said this earlier. They're better. Like, their roster. This is the best roster. I said this before on this podcast. This is the best roster they have had in the Schlenk era. But they still have some questions on the roster. And like you said, the East is just better now than it was.
The East is better, and I mean, is there a bigger question mark in the NBA than DeAndre Hunter?
I knew we would get there. We can do this now if you'd like to, but I knew we were going that way. Trust me. I have said that a few times already on the show, and I know where you stand for the most part. We're going to talk about that. But yeah, I mean, I think there are multiple. I want to be clear. There are additional questions to DeAndre Hunter, but I think that, and I say this, I talk to people about this across the league in Las Vegas that are not Hawks based, and everyone that I have talked to agrees with this. Like, Hunter is one of the bigger swing guys in the entire league this year, because if he's really good, the Hawks ceiling raises so high. It's like similar to like what I was hearing about Patrick Williams and the Bulls, and they're actually very similar, like prospects in that way, like top 5 guys who kind of rose in a weird way.
Not that similar.
No, I'm saying like archetypally, like those guys were not supposed to be top 5 picks. They're both 6'8" forwards that have not proven anything in the NBA level for the most part. I know Hunter had the nice stretch 2 years ago for a third of the season, but like, it's an interesting thing because a lot of the Hawks roster, as much as they've made the big swing on Murray, is the same guys that they have had previously. They didn't, because they only had to trade Gallo in the Murray trade, they didn't change their roster as much as a lot of teams have changed their rosters. But you throw in the Murray dynamic, which is of course going to change things, and Hunter is just a giant question mark. It's just what it is. And I've gotten some flack for being too negative on him, and I really don't think I am. I just think I'm being a practical realist about, like, he has not proven it. It doesn't mean he's not going to do it. And I know you're lower on him than I am, but it's like, no one can deny. I posted his numbers this week on Twitter when comparing him to Keldon Johnson, who got the extension. Like, Keldon Johnson has been leaps and bounds better than DeAndre Hunter in their NBA careers. I'm sorry, that's just true. Like that doesn't mean that Keldon Johnson's going to be better than DeAndre Hunter moving forward, but every number would tell you he's been a better basketball player, and that's only a one-off comparison. Like Hunter's profile through 3 seasons is not that good. It's just not, which is a whole other thing. But it's just that he's and I'm sure we'll get into this. He's got to be good because they have Justin Holiday, and I love Justin Holiday. Justin Holiday is a pure 3-and-D role guy. And he's their backup. He's the only guy on the roster that can kind of do what Hunter's supposed to do.
If Justin Holiday is playing more than 16 minutes a game, something's gone wrong.
Well, I think he's going to at times this year.
Well, I think if everybody's healthy, I'm sorry. I said
No, you're right. You're right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because like
if you have Bogey, I was gonna say if you have Bogey at full strength,
Bogey's playing 30.
I agree with you. So I think during the course of the season, and obviously there's time to litigate this later too. During the course of the season, they might take it easy on Bogey some nights, especially with the knee thing, et cetera. But I agree with you. Like, let's say if they started a playoff series today, which they're not doing, obviously, Justin Holiday would be, in theory, your fourth wing, the guy that plays 15 minutes a night. And then, by the way, he's actually really good in that role. That's a really good role for him, and he's a good player in that role. But if he has to be to our Hunter point here, if Hunter doesn't take a step forward and Hunter is just a guy, and there's like an actual question about who's a better basketball player between Holiday and Hunter, you're in the danger zone there. Because I like Holiday, but Hunter needs to be obviously so much better than him. Again, I don't say this to be piling on. He's not been that much better than Justin Holiday the last couple of years. He's just not been. So it's like you're hoping for that leap. I think it might be coming, but he is one of the bigger pivot guys in the entire league. And I know I'm higher on him than you are. So I'm just kind of bracing people because I know you're not a believer necessarily.
It's not even that, Brad. It's just like, it's just going to be so hard for him in the NBA to be a consistent, good basketball player if all he's bringing to the table is point of attack defense and shot making. Like, that's a tough combination because, man, even the best defenders get beat regularly off the dribble. Like, it's just it just happens. So yeah. But the best defenders, that does happen to them, but they compensate by being good in by being good in help defense, by getting steals, by getting deflections, by getting blocks, by getting rebounds, but more importantly, getting contested rebounds on both ends of the floor. Not just on not just getting defensive rebounds, but like, also, making that additional pass that free somebody up, being a good passer.
No, we've done the Hunter thing. You and I have on this show. I know I talked about it with Glenn a lot too. But like, just to back you up, I think the big frustration for people that are dialed in, watching every single night of the Hawks last year and looking at the numbers, et cetera, it's not the stuff that you might think it would be with Hunter. Like, as Hunter shot well from 3 last year, he's still a good defensive player for the most part. But the fact that he basically gave you absolutely nothing as a rebounder or a passer last year. And like, that's a really tough ask. To your point that you were just making, yes, every team in the league wants a 6'8" forward that can play defense. And I'm not saying otherwise. Even in his current form, if he was healthy all season long, he'd be a useful player. But it's really tough to be, especially when you're playing some minutes at the 4, which he's probably going to again, to play that combo forward role and just never rebound and be one of the worst passers at the 3 in the entire league last year. Like, he had a 6% assist rate last year. Like that's comically bad for a guy who had the ball. And he's not a zero. He's not a pure 3-and-D guy either. Like, he had 20% usage last year. That's the thing about there are some guys that play that super small catch and shoot. We'll call it the Tony Snell role. Like, yeah, those guys don't have high assist rates, but Hunter has the ball in his hands, like a decent amount. Like, for him to have the ball in his hands as much as he did and just never generate assists and never get rebounds, that's the part that drives me crazy. I think it might drive you crazy too, but that's the part that will definitely baffle me from last year. It's not the shot making. He can make shots. He can defend. No one's saying otherwise.
Yeah, and it's not me. It's not me being like he's not good at that. But I'm just saying there's a level above just being like, yes, he can make a tough shots, and he can make good shots. He can get in the mid-range. He can create for himself a bit, not as much. He hasn't shown like elite levels, but he's fine at it.
He can get his own shot in the mid-range for sure.
But the problem is for him to be a productive offensive player and just productive player in general, he has to be featured as if he's a star wing, where we're giving him the ball and we're clearing out and we're running sets for him, and he's getting his ISOs, he's getting his touches, and he has not shown, even in his best stretch, he has not shown the real ability to score over good defenders. Like in one-on-ones, or even when he has a matchup advantage against a good defender, it's just like, to me, I'm like, he's a role player, but to get the maximum value out of him, you kind of have to give him that 20% usage. But then at the same time, you're not getting 20% like levels of production in other areas of the game, like in assists. Like, you're just getting nothing from assists. So
no, I mean, this is obviously just pure numbers, which is not what I mean to do. But just for pure numbers last year, to back you up, like, he had essentially a little bit below average for the league in true shooting percentage last year. Even with, again, he made 38% of his threes. That's above average. But his 2-point shooting cratered last year to the point where he was still below average in shooting efficiency. True shooting percentage, he was below average. And had a comically low assist rate and no offensive rebounding at all. So, like, even just by that measure, before you factor in anything else, that is a below average offensive player. Like, if you produce below average efficiency, and you are way below average as a passer and way below average as an offensive rebounder, you are not a good offensive player in that moment, in that season. And that's where he was last year. Even shooting 38% from three, which I'm not convinced that he's a true talent 38% 3-point shooter. Yeah. He might be. I'm not saying he's not, but like, he might be more of a 36% guy, which is actually his career average. I don't know that to be true, but I'm saying it wasn't like it was like he had flukishly bad 3-point shooting. He actually shot well from three and still fell below all those thresholds. That's the scary part for me, is that he did shoot well from three, and it didn't necessarily fix everything on offense. And I've said this a lot. I'm not saying he has to be the same guy he was last year. I just need everybody to realize and accept what I am saying, and that he wasn't good last year. And it's okay to say it out loud. It doesn't mean that I'm hating on him or that I don't believe in him. I've always liked Hunter. People are mad at me that I liked him in the draft. Like, I was high on him in the draft. I still think that the skill set that he can bring is super interesting. That is not the same thing as acknowledging what he was and was not last year. That's been my whole thing the entire time. And by the way, the year before, yeah, he was really good for 23 games. But like, that means he's been good for 23 games in the last 2 seasons. That's not a very large sample size.
His rookie season did happen, guys. Like,
he was bad as a rookie.
We cannot be like, his rookie season doesn't count and last year doesn't count because he's coming back from this weird knee injury.
And that's all. That's really all I mean. Is like, you cannot look at 3 seasons worth of data and say he is definitely the guy he was for 20 games 2 years ago. He might be. That's actually a possible outcome. And look, if he's that guy, everyone should celebrate, because he was really, really good for a quarter season 2 years ago. But you cannot take that sample out of 3 seasons and just decide that's what he is.
And my concern is, I'm not sure he's going to be allowed to be that guy, because Dejounte Murray's on this team now.
Well, and yeah, here's my point. That would be that maybe not, but yeah, I think Murray's going to take up some usage. That's for sure.
Murray is taking usage from somebody, and people are from weirdly, like, it's like people think it's going to happen with Collins, but like, it's not as if it's not as if they run plays. Collins' usage from his work ethic off the ball, he gets himself open.
And it's not from Collins last year. Collins' usage rate last year was a 4-year low. Like, it's not coming from his usage rate. Murray is going to come from, obviously, he's replacing Huerter, and it's going to come from probably a little bit of Trey. I think Trey's usage rate will be a little bit lower, just a little bit. He's still going to have star level usage, but he's going to be, the last couple of seasons. I'm looking now just to make sure I'm not crazy. Yeah, Trey the last 3 years has a 34.5% usage rate. That'll be a little lower, I think, with Murray. I hope so. But to your point that you were getting to, like, it's not going to be Collins. It's going to be Obviously, Gallo is not there anymore. That's some usage that's going to go away, probably to Murray. But logically speaking, you would think that maybe Hunter has a usage rate decline because everybody else is kind of what they are. I mean, Bogey's going to play less, I think, now because of the knee and because of the fact that Murray's going to start and all that stuff. But like the whole point of Bogey is that he's going to come in and shoot the ball. Hunter might just become more of a pure 3-and-D guy. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that might happen.
If Hunter and so this is my concern. Like Hunter might very well be a much better basketball player next year. I don't think he's going to get the opportunity to really put his stamp on things the way he has in previous years because Murray's here. And when Bogey's in the game, Bogey's coming in to shoot. And like also Bogey's offensive value is just more like he's just going to be more featured. And so here's my concern is like if we're getting less of Hunter and he's not like his defense, I don't know, man. Like it's good, but it's not elite.
That's a good way to put it. Yes.
You know what?
It's right now elite. It's good. It's good and not elite.
Can we be like he's a better defender than Mo Harkless and Justin Holiday?
Yeah, he is.
Maybe.
Yeah, but the thing, and also I will say this in Hunter's
purely on the perimeter though. But
yeah, I was gonna say, and to put Hunter, we talked about Murray earlier, and we'll get to him in a minute as well, just overall. But I do think that having Murray defensively is going to help Hunter as well because Murray is going to take some of those assignments that Hunter's had to take in previous years of lead guards, where Hunter was like the guy they put on lead guards a lot, and that'll be Murray now. Which might allow Hunter to be a little bit more settled and just like kind of just being the big wing defender because that's what he was billed to be. I mean, all of the irresponsible Kawhi comparison stuff from his rookie season and all that stuff. But like now he can just be that guy. He can go out and guard the best wing sized guy on the other team and have Murray guard the best guard sized guy.
But here's my concern because that stretch of 2 years ago, DeAndre Hunter was that lead defender who we put on anybody.
That's what they did.
He was really good at it.
Yep.
Like he was really good at it. Last year, not so much. He was fine, but he wasn't as good as he was before the knee injury.
I was gonna say that's the health thing too. That's always it's still
like
lingering out there with Hunter.
But this is the issue, Brad. It's like if he's not that guy on defense anymore, even if he's good, do they want to pay him?
Well, and there's a whole different discussion about the extension. And I say this all the time. Like I am not a fan of giving out market value extensions to non-max players. And that's where I would draw the line on her. If they can get a great discount, I do understand that. Because look, for everything we've already said, if Hunter has a great season in year 4, he's going to make $100 million. Because he's a 6'8" forward who has top 5 pedigree and he can play defense. And if he has if he has a breakout season, he might get 400 from somebody, and it could be the Hawks. But if he doesn't have a breakout season and you've just paid him 4 for 80, let's say the Kelton Johnson contract, that isn't going to look good because now you have a guy who has been mediocre for 4 seasons, who is not even young, by the way. Like by draft pick standards, Hunter is already 24. He'll be 25 in December. That's not old, but you're paying. This is his prime. This is his one prime contract. You're paying him for ages 26 to 29. Like that's generally a guy's prime. So like, it's interesting. I mean, I can see all sides. And the thing, I can see him having the breakout season. As much as we've just said a lot of things, like the guy his talent is in there to where no one should be surprised, and this includes me, if he was to go out there and post a season where like, okay, he's definitely a top, 80 player in the league a year from now. That shouldn't surprise anyone. If he goes out and has like one of those seasons where he plays 73 games and the counting stats are just okay, like he averages 15 points a game or whatever, but he plays good defense, he rebounds better, he improves his efficiency, he stays healthy. If that happens for one season, you know how this is going to go. People already do that don't watch the Hawks because he's a former top 5 pick. You heard it in the playoffs. People are like, oh, DeAndre Hunter was great this season. Like, no, he wasn't. He wasn't great this season at all. But every team in the league wants a 6'8" two-way forward with some ball skills. And he is. That's what he is. So if he puts it together, like, it's going to look awesome. That's the thing. It's so tantalizing about it. And that's honestly, that's part of the maybe not problem is the wrong word, but because we all saw it for 6 weeks, we know it's in there. It's like that happened and fans know it's there. And I don't blame anybody for being excited because look, if he could just bottle that guy from the first 6 weeks of 2 years ago and do that for 70 games, he'd be a near max player. That's what those guys get paid.
Yeah, it's just I think my fear is if he has a shooting slump, I can see Nate benching him for
Holiday
or Holiday, like just getting benched. Like
there is pressure. There is pressure.
There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure on DeAndre Hunter, and the Hawks this year do actually have options to move, including just playing Murray at the 3.
Well, there's that too, but this is the first time. I didn't think about this till right now. Honestly, this is the first time in the winning team era of the Hawks, so the last couple seasons, where they've actually had a credible replacement for him as a small forward. Like they've obviously played the Huerter bogey lineup a lot, which has success, and we talked about it a lot. That group has actually worked a ton, but that group is obviously an offense leaning group because those guys playing together plus Trey, we all know the deal on that. Mm-hmm. This is the first time they've had a veteran role player forward that has, by the way, who has played for Nate before. Like if Hunter struggles for 20 games, I'm not saying they're going to bench him for Justin Holiday, but I could totally see Justin Holiday playing more and more if Hunter's not playing well. Because this is the first time Nate's actually had a guy he could go to that was better than Tony Snell, better than Solomon Hill. And obviously it was Cam, who was another young guy before that. Like Justin Holiday is a ready-made plug-and-play role player. And that could be enticing if the guy in front of you is not great. Especially when you're Nate. And by the way, you probably have some pressure for your job if you're not winning this year. And you just default to veterans anyway. Like, I'm not saying it's going to happen because it probably won't. I think the Hunter, honestly, if he is healthy, is going to play a ton. Because
that's what he is. Agree. I think he's going to play a ton. But look, I know we're probably not going to be talking about AJ Griffin too much on this podcast. We'll probably discuss it later, but
we'll come back to it. Yeah.
I mean, if Griffin plays, he's going to make open 3-point shots at a rate that's
probably all he's going to do as a rookie, to be honest.
But like Brad, we both know how valuable that is on the floor. Like, you want to impact winning as a young player, make open 3-pointers. Force teams have to defend you. Open up cutting lanes, open up driving lanes for Trae Young and Dejounte Murray. Griffin's very talented.
Yeah.
Jalen Johnson's going to be fighting his way for minutes. My thing with DeAndre is he has to produce. Like there's no we're going to take the baby steps. If he's not playing well, somebody's just going to take his spot. That's just that's the situation the Hawks have put themselves in. That's the situation DeAndre Hunter put themselves in because, like, we can love the talent all we want, but the on-court production just has not been there. He was. I'll just leave it.
It's unquestionably to put. We can put a cap on it, but like, this is unquestionably. He has a ton of pressure individually, both for his contractual future, all that stuff. It's a prove-it season for him to stay healthy, which, at bare minimum, we're all rooting for him to be healthy for every possible reason. But, like, even last year, he acknowledged he was not his same self physically at times, and he played 53 games. He's missed a lot of time in the last 2 years. And, like, I hope for his sake that he's healthy. I also just, again, he is very clearly their pivot point. I think that there's stuff to be discussed about how Trey and Dejounte fit together. There's stuff to be discussed about how Bogey fares with the knee. We'll see how Jalen Johnson fares with his potentially bigger role. There's the Capella. There's stuff all over the roster. But like, if there's one guy to circle as, for me anyway, the difference between this team being a legitimate threat to win a series in the playoffs next year versus a team that could be in the play-in again, it's Hunter. Like, he's the guy. He's the pivot guy. Obviously, Trey's the best player, all that stuff, but Hunter is the guy that can give them a ton of ceiling, or he can really cap their ceiling if he's not great. All right, that's it for part 1 of 2 with Tyler Jones. If you missed it earlier, part 2 is already in your feeds right now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube, etc. Click on over and go ahead and listen to that podcast in sequential order. I definitely recommend that. Please subscribe to the show on your platform of choice. Follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me on Twitter at BT Rowland. Part 2 is available for you, and we'll see you next time.